So talk to me more about that. It's very fascinating.
You're intuiting a lot of it. I would say the easiest is to talk about buds, right? And so, people think about buds or basic underwater demolition / SEAL school. They think of it as unbelievable physical rigor. And it is physically rigorous, but it's only physically rigorous to test for mental and spiritual resiliency. I remember
spiritual.
I think, for me, and that's not necessarily religious, spiritual, but like source. Because to me, if you're going to be in full surrender to a purpose, a mission, to me, that's a spiritual endeavor that's beyond me. So to me, like that's beyond just the individual self. And so that's the most fascinating part of it is it's ingrained into you that you cannot do it alone, right? If you ever leave your swim buddy and run off by yourself, you're going to get, extra EMI, extra military instruction. You're going to suffer. And running with a boat on your head, it's fascinating because, if the six are moving in unity, then the synergy is fantastic and you can do pretty amazing things. The moment that somebody pulls their head out from underneath and the weight is transferred and it's unwieldy, and all of a sudden, like you cannot perform the task. We do log PT. So you literally can't lift the log unless everyone's lifting as one. And so you learn like, okay, here's what we can do as a collective. And so that the part is the most fascinating part of becoming a team. Like I have 5 kids, 3 of them teenagers. And so they're going from dependence to independent. And their quest is, I don't want to be surrendered to my dad's orders right now. So I'm doing everything to separate and become independent. And the military, I really think, does an amazing job training for interdependence. And that culmination comes to when you get to the most high-end missions where, you said, what's my favorite moment in the military was when we were in the desert. It was in Iraq at the time, but like the rotors spin up and then when the sand hits the outside of these rotors, you've got like, it's like causes sparks. And so you've got this 2 rings of lightning around this outside of this helicopter. It's completely pitch black and you're completely adrenalized. And of course you board the helicopter and you're sitting about as far apart as you and I are. And then you've got your night vision on, but then you kind of move it up in 45 and give a quick head nod. And that head nod means my life and yours and mine. And I now understand that is like, that's the coherent field where now in full surrender to the mission, everyone now becomes a collective, that hive mind or that flow state that now allows each person to have that complete dynamic subordination with so when those 10 helicopters fly off simultaneously, and I said, Curt, can you go on anything that comes your way? I'd say, absolutely. And do you have any idea how? None. But it was a complete trust that the helicopter pilots are completely in charge until the moment you land. And then the reconnaissance team leads you out because they're the most qualified to lead. And then without 100 meters of the target, the breachers come up front to get the door open. And as soon as the doors open, the assaulters come up. And so it's this dance where everybody knows that the moment it's theirs to do, you're required to do it. And the moment it's someone else's, helicopter pilots are not good on target. SEALs can't fly helicopters. It becomes that fun part where there's that as a collective, the interdependence allows you to do that no individual could do. And so that to me is the most fascinating part of service at the highest level and service to each other.
Wow.
And Stephen Pressfield's one of my favorite authors. There's a section in Gates of Fire where he talks about how do you get ready for combat. And it's interesting because when you deploy for the big things. You deploy to protect your family, to protect the nation, to protect others. That was really my calling. Was I thought we've got this incredible gift that we never even asked for our lives. And the greatest threat I thought to humanity was terrorism. Someone taking that gift from you without your permission. And so that was what led me to that first calling was, okay, can I stand the line between those who do harm and those who can defend themselves? And could I surround myself with individuals that could complete these impossible missions? And so that was where the initial calling came from. And that level of service was it's so exhilarating when you really realize the power of the collective.
Wow. So obviously that all of this has to be rehearsed, choreographed, understood. You're running through all the simulations, all the scenarios, all the possibilities, eventualities. Like how does that happen? Like are you like the 16 get selected, and then like are the 16 going through the rigor, or the 6 is going through the rigor, or what's happening? And like how do you form the team of 6? How do you form you were 16, right? So how do you form this team of 6? And what is the simulation? What happens? Like the war games, and what are you trying to fight for? Like, I would love to understand.
Well, it's fascinating because part of it is learning to plan for anything and everything. And then at a certain level, you have to forget it all so that you can be in a flow state. That's the most fascinating part, is like we would do contingency planning and work through every possible scenario that can go wrong. So, logically, you have to think of everything that can go wrong. And then once the operation starts, you have to kind of release that. And now trust that the person in the point man in the front, we're going to completely respond to whatever he says. CQC, close quarters combat, is one of the most fascinating and dynamic aspects, because if we stack on a door, if there's 4 people, the one man's whole door responsibility is to hold the door. The 2 man is then to make sure, okay, do we have everybody in the stack? Are we ready? And if you give them that squeeze, when the 1 man goes through, he might go left, he might go right. You don't know which one he's going to do, but he knows completely that the person behind him is going to go the opposite way. And then the 3 person is going to follow behind that. And it's fascinating because if I enter a room, if I go to the left, so I have no idea all these threats over here, I'm completely vulnerable to. But if I get distracted and I don't cover my area of responsibility and I look over at theirs, then I'm actually have left my whole team vulnerable because they're not going to look where my responsibility is. So the interdependence of, if I'm focused on my 45 and 360 to 45, I have an 8x mathematical advantage on anyone that I'm functioning as a team. And so now all of a sudden I'm focused here. If I clear my threat, then I take a second sweep and help, and then I can go help anyone. But first I have to do what's mine to do. And so it's fascinating that the fact that you can now go into a room where people are set up and waiting for you, but because you're functioning as a collective, you can still overcome almost any odds.